And are you refreshed? Yes. Good. And there you are.
Yes, I am. All queued up, ready to go. I have two questions, and before I lined up with being able to speak with you, and have let one go, so I'm going to bring one first for me, and then one about my son, our son. And you've taught me about when you have neutral decisions, the elevator, the stairs. Some people have heard this conversation. Just pick one and line up your thoughts with it. And I'm experiencing in my day-to-day life wanting to focus on how I wish things to be and being in the vortex. And sometimes I feel like I'm on the edge of the vortex and I get a little bit out, and I think that I get this kind of pressure in my chest. I'm not sure what my thoughts are that are getting me out of the vortex. And it's different than a focus wheel, which I've used to great effect and I like to do more, and I'm meditating more on a daily basis and creating a better flow every day. But I wanted to have an understanding of when my mind is telling me to figure this out and go this way versus being inspired, like today when I was inspired to go get bread pudding and the new bread pudding showed up 10 seconds later and when it was out, and understand the difference between my physical mind kind of saying, oh, choose this, as opposed to my inner being inspiring me to say, go this way. And I think it has a lot to do with the timing and my enjoying my day-to-day life more.
Well, we can make this simple just by offering two comments to you. And the first is, you've already done the asking. Do you agree?
Yes, absolutely.
So most of what you're doing as you're moving through your day is either having another step one moment where you're doing more asking, or you are, and here it is, seeking the path of least resistance.
Yes.
That's what a lot of your day is. You're just looking for the path of least resistance. But if you have a mindset that you're trying to make it happen, now you're not looking for the path of least resistance. And so we think if you'll just hold those thoughts in your mind, in other words, what is the path of least resistance? Now, going back to an analogy as simple and almost silly as, should I take the stairs or the escalator?
Right.
Some would say, well, the path of least resistance is clearly get on the escalator. But if your intention is to get your blood moving and feel some vitality, then the path of least resistance would be to walk up the stairs. And so it's not something that anybody else can define for you. It's just what feels best to me right now. If you've already walked up 18 flights of stairs, the escalator would be the path of least resistance, maybe right now. In other words, it's just an in the moment, what feels like the path of least resistance. And even with advanced students of Abraham, like those here in this room, there's something that feels a little off to you sometimes when we say, choose the path of least resistance, because they taught you early on that that was lazy.
Right.
And we want to say, not only is it not lazy, it's prudent. Because when you allow the universal forces that are already underway for you to do the work, and you're choosing the path of least resistance, now you're on your way. So you're really doing most of your work during the step one moments, aren't you?
Yeah, and I'm trying to enjoy my day-to-day life more, because I know all the prosperity and well-being is a match to having fun through my office life. But I get these glitches, and it's this tightening in my chest or my stomach.
Well,
I
usually,
feel out of, I know there's some resistance, but I don't know what the thoughts, I don't know how to identify the thoughts, because I'm in the car and did I leave at the wrong time? Did I go left? I mean, I feel like
well, here it is.
somehow.
We can give this to you, and as you watch, you'll recognize this. If you were to breathe out more than you breathe in, you'd feel restriction in your chest. If you spend more than you make, you feel the tension of that. And when you ask more for a period of time, from a period of time, then you can comfortably or effectively give. In other words, what happens to you is you're just asking too much of yourself in a segment of time. You think you're invincible. In other words, you're wanting to be the best at that and really good at that and really good at that. And the bigger your life gets, and your life is bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger, the bigger your life gets, then the more you expect of yourself. And sometimes you get out of balance. Jerry and Esther are always having to take that into consideration, because there are so many others that they want to answer, and there's so so much fun stuff they like to do, and they have a publisher that would take 5 books a year and really wants at least one. And then the publisher wants the audio version of it before the edited book is even complete. And Esther is wanting to explain, this is not a simple thing to read that much onto a recording and get it edited. In other words, but her desire to please them is strong, and she can feel the calling from the masses who want the product. In other words, you have to be selfish to keep yourself in control, because once you get out there as you are, there are always more who will call you forward. But here's what gets you out of balance. And you're really going to like this. If the only thing that is calling you forward is what's in your own escrow, it's much easier for you to get into balance. But if you're trying to answer that one and that one and that one and that one, you get out of balance. And why? Because usually those who are calling, almost all of those who are calling, are outside of the vortex. And as you're trying to soothe something that's outside of the vortex, you usually get dragged outside of the vortex, and that's what causes that tension. So the thought is, I'm trying to please too many people on too many subjects in too short of time. Yeah. The thought is, I'm trying to soothe out of the vortex people, and that's not my job. My responsibility is to be in the vortex.
What I think what happens is, it may not be that those people are really necessarily out of the vortex in that moment, but what I'm thinking about them judging is an out of the vortex perception of them. And that's, their higher selves would only want me to do what's best for me, much as I want that for them. Whoever's calling me forward.
So what overwhelmment is, which is really what you're identifying here, is asking too much of yourself in a given moment in time. And by that, in previous conversations, the way we've put that is trying to do too much with action and not letting the universal forces carry enough of it. And in today's conversation, we would say, trying to do too much out of the vortex. Esther has been really laughing since we've been talking about in the vortex and out of the vortex. She will sometimes struggle with something, a piece of equipment or something that's just giving her grief. She tried to upload a sound file. It was necessary that it be sent that night in order to keep the twice monthly program on track. And so many people waiting for it. Esther wants to be timely about it. And they were in a hotel and it would not upload. It just wouldn't go. It was nearly 600 megabytes, which is a very big file. And 300 of it would go and then it would stop. And then she would start it again. And every upload was a 5-hour upload. And so she was setting her alarm and getting up and it wouldn't go 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 and it wouldn't go. And through the whole process, she was outside of the vortex trying to make it go. Right. Go, you bugger. Go, go. And sometimes you forget that the effort that you make from outside of the vortex is really hard on you.
Yeah, you can feel that effort and resistance, because I have a lot that happens in a day. I mean, dozens of patients and phone calls and emails. And since meditating and trying to envision things flowing more easily, it's gone much, much, much more smoothly, which makes me more acutely aware when I'm in that out of the vortex action. And that's my trick is like, well, gosh, I've got to take action because I'm out of time. So how do I create the time to get myself back in the vortex? Of course, part of me is saying I have no other choice, do I? No, you have a choice. You can continue to suffer. And that's why I'm here. I don't want to.
But when it's happening, if you're aware of it, when you feel that restriction and you realize that you're just trying to milk too much from this moment, stop and say, it isn't that I'm trying to milk so much from this period of time. It's that there's too much resistance present while I'm trying to do it. It's the resistance right now that's the problem. So that's the best time to just sort of sit down, count to 10, close your eyes, close your door, take a break. In other words, what you've heard from us all day here today is get in the vortex and then anything you have time for. Get in the vortex and then anything you have time for. And what you begin to discover is once you're in the vortex, much of that time takes care of itself. You can get into a sort of time warp where much more happens. Meaningful conversations, you connect connect more, less confused patients, more acutely efficient staff.
Yeah, absolutely, yeah. And it's recognizing when I'm getting out of balance to take a little time to get more balanced. Thank you.
Well, it's that in and out thing. Just say that to yourself. It's that in and out thing. And out of balance is trying to spend more than you have, breathe more out than you've breathed in, do more in a period of time than the time allows. The best process we know for bringing this into alignment is the process called segment intending. Because if let's say you get up in the morning, Esther laughs every now and again because they'll meet someone and the person will mistakenly say, "Where are you going next?" And Jerry will say, "Well, we're in Boca and we're going to go to Orlando and then we're going to drive up through Georgia and then we're going to stop in Asheville for 3 days and then we're going to move up through Washington, D.C. and then Philadelphia and then we're going to go up and do Tarrytown, New York and then we're going to do Boston and then we're going to Boston again and we're going to drive all the way across to Chicago and then we're going to drive all the way across to Denver and then we're going to drive over to Seattle." And Esther's thinking, "Just kill me now." In other words, as she's listening to all of this, she's thinking, "What did I sign on for? What was I thinking? What in the world was I thinking?" It's just way, and then Esther is thinking, and not only that, you should understand how many things have to be done before and after every one of those stops, and how many miles we drive, and how big this bus is, and how much stuff we have to hook up to it, and how many campgrounds we're going to be in, and how many phone calls I have to make in order to say, and Esther is thinking, "Oh, way overwhelming." The thought is overwhelming. Too much thought about too much activity right here and now. But when she actually thinks about the process, in other words, today, I'm just going to go from here to here. I'm just going to go from here to here today. So segment intending will give you a sort of handle on your vibration. It really soothes that overwhelming feeling. It stops you from trying to consider more than you can do in this segment. So we would, on a daily basis, we would acknowledge, in this segment called this month, I'm going to do these things. And then just generally identify what they are. Esther might say, finish the editing of a book, do a couple of twice monthlies, have some wonderful seminars, and move the bus from here to here. In other words, that's basically it for this month. And this week, no twice monthly has to be done this week. But these things do. And for this day, what is this day about? Well, when you get down to the day, now you can think about the walk that you want to take and the lovely meals that you're going to eat and the conversations that you're going to have. And you can also factor in the responsibilities that you've already committed to. But then when you break this day down to an even more specific segment, we would stop segment by segment. And a new segment is any time your intentions shift, if only slightly. So when you interface with a new patient, this is a new segment. And before we walked into that interaction, we would stop and for at least 30 seconds, we would identify, what do I most want during this segment? And the first statement that will be easy for all of you to make now is, I want to be in the vortex. I want to be in the vortex. I want to be tuned in. I want to be empowered as much as I can. I want to be a good listener. I want to hear what they're saying. I want to be intuitive. I want to be right on the beam. I want to be fun. I want to be brief. I want to be effective. I want to be uplifted. I want to be exhilarated. I want it to be a good exchange for both of us. I want it to be life-giving to both of us. Now, a segment like that won't drain you at all. A segment like that will feed you. It won't deplete you because you've lined up with your intentions and you have softened any resistance by your focused clarity. And once you do this for a while, you'll get really hooked on this segment intending because you will hook up on more of a moment-to-moment basis with the power of the universe. But the most important thing is you won't try to run your whole route in this moment.
Oh, right.
In other words, this moment, you'll only bite off what you can chew in this moment in terms of thought. You see what we're getting at? And of course, you may already be disciplined enough that you're doing that, but there's a hooking into energy that will feed you.